Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. So we're going to be carrying on with some ink work, it being Inktober and all, so you guys might be aware of Inktober, where people do ink projects basically through October, usually one a day, so it's a good little kind of series of exercises to do. And it's also Halloween, so I'm doing a skull. And skulls are something that feature a lot in my work, but it's certainly at least as appropriate at this time of year. So before we work in ink, we're going to be starting off just using pencils. So I've got an 8B and I also have an HB, which I may not use, an eraser and some paper. So we can get started with this drawing. So I'm going to be starting off today just blocking in the skull, getting its approximate placement, approximate width. So I'll probably my paper actually carries on a little bit further to the right, but in order to kind of keep it roughly in your frame, put the back of the skull about here, and then front of the skull is going to kind of loop down towards that point. So that makes it a reasonable size for you guys to be watching. Maybe a little bit higher up, maybe pull it a little bit further back. So you can see I'm just using these simple lines for the block in order to kind of start getting stuff placed. Maybe move the lower part of the jaw a little bit more to the right. So I'm getting the kind of tilt through the cheekbones, and I'll mirror that with the brows. So we're kind of getting this chunk of the skull in. And then we've got sort of, I guess, the turning point almost, where the sort of the front of the face kind of almost makes like a front block shape, and then it kind of angles back. So we can sort of start to think of, when we're looking at skulls like this, it gives us a little bit of an idea of what's going on in a human head. So you tend to get this kind of effect where the side plane of the head kind of angles back quite sharply from the front blocky part of the face. So you've got this sort of front block and then a side block. The kind of shaping of it undulates in and out, which is where you get the kind of interesting shapes through the face. And obviously we've got our jaw then projecting. We've got this gap in the jaw. So we've got a black background behind that, but for this drawing we're going to be leaving that blank. So we've got teeth project forwards, this plane kind of angles back a bit, those kind of first set of teeth. Apologies for my cough. So the feeling in my skull, probably it kind of like angles back a little bit too much. So I'm going to try to pull forward a little bit, maybe pull the point where the teeth cut back in back. I think that's maybe part of the sense of it tilting backwards. It was projecting a bit too far out the bottom. This feels a little bit better now. So this whole stage is kind of looking at the structure and preparing it for being able to go in and actually start looking at proper shapes and inking and stuff like that in subsequent sessions. So you can see I'm not using complex lines at all. Everything at the moment's still nice and simple. So I'm using this, got that little shadow that sticks up from the teeth. I'm going to use that to connect across to the nose cavity. So one thing I'm thinking about a little bit about here is I want the alignments horizontally to kind of match up. So I'm aware of the fact that this part of the cheekbone probably sits relative to the nose at about this point. That's probably about right. But the other one in the reference is sitting a lot higher, so that means we've got to do something. Probably pull this back cheekbone up would be my first port of call. This is going to make a little bit more of a steep angle across there. So pull that up and then go for where do we want our bottom of our eye socket to be. This is going to shuffle things around a little bit. So what we currently have is not right for that eye, if this is the case. So to accommodate that lifting around the eye socket, I've just lifted the top of the skull as well. And I'll probably pull out the back a little bit too. But I want to try to not have it angle back too rapidly, so the heights can change, but I've probably gone a little bit too far back now, so it was kind of creating this, over-exaggerating this kind of sloping sense of the sloping quality of it. Get rid of this shadow here. So what we want to do now is kind of working from the nose because we decided the nose was correct and we based a lot of stuff off that. So we've got that nose cuts in there, angle straight up. So I don't want to go much, put much more shading in or go much heavier than that in terms of shading, just because this is an inking piece, so we're just kind of mapping out currently with pencil. We don't want to do the entire thing in pencil. Same thing from that for that eye socket. I just want to try to get a sense of its size and width and so on, just to make sure it roughly feels like it's fitting into the overall proportions. I think possibly maybe this eye could drop a little bit lower, the one on the right. Yeah, it feels a little bit more natural. I'll maybe pull the top one of the skull in as well. And yeah, that's starting to get us to a slightly better position. I'm gonna just start to map out some of the darker points in the shadows, just for when a lot of this is going to be kind of pretty laid in fairly heavily. But yeah, that's starting to look all right, I think. maybe just make some notes for where we're going to put the kind of major gaps in the teeth. I find with teeth and skulls, if you sort of map those out, at least the major points, it kind of gives you a little bit of spacing and pacing for them. So there's a few gaps on that side. This side we've got a more prominent gap. So that just gives us a little bit of an idea about the teeth. Maybe a little bit of a note for where we've got the gap where the jaws meeting the skull. So back here, we've got a little bit of, I think, probably background showing through again. So a tiny bit here as well, so that would be background. But otherwise, we're getting pretty close to a good point to stop. If I was drawing, obviously I'd be drawing it in pencil, I'd be carrying on, but I think that's pretty good if we don't want to kind of overwork. So yeah, that's looking pretty good for the next stage. So we'll leave it there for today. Got everything pretty much mapped out as I want it to start going in with ink. So we'll kind of immediately be jumping straight in with ink next week and working over the top of this. This kind of plan basically. So it's not this isn't a finished piece in its own right. This is a plan for the finished piece essentially. Yeah. So that's what we're aiming for. You can go straight in with ink, but it's sort of like, if you're first starting out, it's kind of nice to have something underneath, a little structure you're working to, that you create just to kind of scaffold onto. Before you jump straight into something as permanent as ink. So even the pencil, as I say, you want to be really careful that you're not going, you can erase like I did just there, without it affecting the look of the final drawing. So yeah, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, you can follow us on YouTube, so click the subscribe button on YouTube to see videos from myself, other time lapses, videos from tutors covering different subjects, and testimonials from students and that kind of thing. And you can also click the link through in the description to our website, the school's website, and see the sorts of paid qualifications that we offer as well. So yeah, check that out, and otherwise I will see you guys next week.